All right, now that we have this in the shop, it's time to kind of give it a once over and see what all we need. Our goal with this is basically street legal. Make sure it can pass inspection, make sure it's somewhat safe to drive down the road, but mostly we're going to be using it on the farm, so we're not going for a full-on restoration. That may be somewhere in its future, but for right now we're going to focus on functional aspects and go from there. Our first order of business on this is to actually get decent tires on it. The ones that are on here, as you can see, are pretty chewed up. These all have inner tubes, so even though the tire itself can be chewed up, they can still be held up with the inner tube, like this one is. This one miraculously still has air in it. And then these other one back here, the outer tire is still up, but as you can probably tell, the inner tire is flat. And of course this one is pretty bad. Compounding the issue are these split rims. Most any rims nowadays are one piece. This one actually has this ring that goes around the outside that interlocks in it. The problem with that is, especially on this one where we can see that it's bent, is if that ring doesn't engage exactly into the rim whenever the tire is aired up, it can blow out with an extreme amount of force, enough to kill somebody. And that's a problem so much that tire repair shops will not touch these. So we're going to need to replace not only the tires, but the entire rims as well. Here's a better look at the rear wheels. You can see the actual ring of this inside there. Maybe this is a better view of it, where it interlocks on the inside. These aren't quite as dangerous because if this blows out, it blows into the wheel and not actually out, but that can still cause a lot of damage. And if somebody's fingers are in there like trying to air this up, then we could lose them. So these need to be replaced as well. And then once we get these tires off, the next thing we'll look at are brakes. As we saw that we had absolutely no brake pedal before, even with brake fluid in there, it just goes completely to the ground. So that may be a master cylinder issue, which we do have a new master cylinder ready to be put in there, or it could be brake components. Everything here is drum brakes, and so it could be that, it could be the slave cylinders, who knows. So I was having a look under here at some of these suspension components, and we can see that there's a leaf off this leaf spring that's kind of off axis there, so that'll need to be straightened out. The frame itself looks pretty good. I mean, there's a lot of rust down here, but I don't see anything that's bent. I'm not sure how good of a shot I'm going to get of that. There's an auxiliary fuel tank, which that may be what's leaking. That hasn't been used in a very long time, so it may be just totally rusted out. Of course, these shocks are going to have to be replaced. Over here on this other side, it's difficult to see from this angle. I'll try to film on a better one, but where all of that is riding on the axle is actually pushed forward a bit, so that may need to be straightened out. U-joints feel good, there's no play in that. Of course, we'll need to change the oil in this rear differential. We can see some of the brake hoses there. If those are rubber, they'll need to be replaced. So one thing I did notice under here is these bolts for this shackle that attaches a leaf spring to the frame. That lock washer isn't engaging at all, so Those need to be tightened. Here's another problem on the front suspension. This actually used to be a shock tower. So if we look over here on the other side, this is what it's supposed to look like. And of course, here's the shock, which attaches down here. And then those shackles are loose. So that's going to have to be fixed. Let me come back around to the other side here. So the shock should go down here, and as we can see, it's missing, and then that bracket's actually bent. I don't know if it's supposed to be that way or something actually bent it. Rubber brake hose, that's going to have to be replaced. Steering gearbox that's probably last had oil 40 years ago. From a drivability standpoint, the first thing we're going to need is new wheels and tires, new brake components, new master cylinder, which we already have. And then once we take the wheels off, take the brake drums off, see what that is, how everything looks back there, replace as necessary. We'll work on these suspension components, try to realign that back axle, at least as where the leaf spring is concerned, and then figure out how to get a new bracket for the shock tower on here. Put new shocks on it. Part of the leaf springs are missing some of these rubber things here. That one is still there, but in the back they have those double leaf springs and they're missing a few. We need to clean out that main fuel tank. It actually has an auxiliary tank with a switch right here buried in rat nest stuff that needs to be cleaned out. But this switches between this main fuel tank that's actually behind the seat here and this auxiliary tank right here. And as far as I know, that auxiliary tank has never been used. It may be rusted out, maybe full of water. I think what we're going to do is just take this valve off, totally do away with that. I'm going to leave the tank on there. There's no point in grinding it off. But we'll put some evapo rust or CLR or something in there to help clean up that tank. Probably have to run a new fuel line to it, at least to bypass that selector switch. And then with brakes, wheels and tires, and fuel tank, this should be at a point to where we can drive it around the farm. And then after that, we'll work on glass. This is all missing, and of course all that's busted out. The windshield is probably fine. They tell me that the only reason windshields would fail inspection is if the actual wiper stops on the crack, so I think we're okay there. But where this weather stripping is gone, yeah, I mean, I can get my finger all the way in there, so we know that water is going to go in there. And we've got rats who tried to make a home in this. So obviously, oh wow, that metal's paper thin. Oh, look at that. So yeah, that's definitely going to need some body work. I don't know how repairable that's going to be. But we at least need to get the holes covered so more water doesn't come in there. And then after that's done, we will work on electrical. We did have this rewired, 20 years ago, all that. Interestingly, the wiring that they put in, along with some of these, well, what's left of these marker lights, those all rotted out. But some of these reflectors and stuff that's been on here forever, like this is I mean, this tail light is not one that was redone. That was been on there forever. Those stayed, but the new things just rotted off. So we're going to be starting fresh on electrical. That whole instrument panel has got to go. This is HVAC. That's the fan. I don't even know if that works or not. These are snapped off. I guess that's the heater. Just to give you an idea of how bad the rust is on here and how much body work we're going to have to do, or rather have done. This is just next to the door behind the wheel, and as you can see, this stuff is paper thin. It's full of rust, full of dirt, and all of that just holds water and continues to rust things out. So before we do anything else, I think I'm going to run a compression check on all cylinders, because as you may recall from the first video of getting it running, it did have an engine miss, so it's been running on 5 out of 6 cylinders. I was actually going to include that in this video, but that ended up getting pretty long, so I'm just going to make that a second video. We go in there and figure out, you know, why it's only running on 5 cylinders and how we get everything going. And then once that's all figured out, then I will get the new wheels and tires and get everything else going on this and post videos accordingly. But anyway, thanks for watching. Be sure and like and subscribe, and I'll see you next time.